When you think about it, these animals are living relics, titans from a prehistoric age. But the story of the rhinoceros, well, it's a story of survival against some pretty incredible odds. Today, we're going to dig into the story of this iconic animal, from ancient myths all the way to its modern-day fight for existence. Let's get into it.
Would you believe that for centuries, this is how Europe imagined a rhino? This amazing woodcut is from 1515 by an artist named Albrecht Dürer, who, get this, had never actually seen one. He was working off of written descriptions, so he dreamed up this creature covered in armor plates like a tank, with this extra little horn on its back. The text on it even described it as being the color of a speckled tortoise and, this is my favorite part, fast, merry, and jovial. It was a total legend, an armored monster, and for a very long time, it was the only rhino Europe knew.
So, okay, if Dürer's armored beast wasn't quite the real deal, what is the true story of the rhino? To really get a handle on the challenges it's facing today, we have to look past the myths and dive deep into its ancient past and its very, very fragile present.
All right, so here's our game plan. We'll start with that incredible legend. Then we'll jump way back in time to meet a true prehistoric survivor. After that, we'll get to know the 5 species that are left on Earth, face the devastating horn crisis head-on, and finally, take a look at the global fight for their future.
You see, the story of the modern rhino doesn't just start a few centuries ago. Nope, it starts millions of years ago. To understand them, we have to see them not just as animals, but as survivors from a lost world, a time when giants really did roam the Earth.
That's right. When you look at a rhino, you are literally looking back in time. You're seeing one of the very last direct links to the ancient megafauna. I'm talking about animals that walk the Earth with woolly mammoths and saber-toothed cats. Their survival into our era is like a rare window into a prehistoric world.
And this timeline just shows you the sheer scale of their history. 40 million years ago, the first members of the rhino family showed up. Then, during the Miocene epoch, they were everywhere, all over the world with tons of different species. But you can see what happens next. Their numbers have been shrinking for a very, very long time. By the late Pleistocene, we were down to 9 species. And today, just 5. So this isn't a recent problem. It's more like the final chapter of a very long, epic story.
So let's meet the 5 remaining members of this ancient family. We've got 2 in Africa and 3 in Asia. And each one has its own unique story and its own desperate struggle to survive.
And this table, wow, it puts everything into stark perspective. The white rhino is the most numerous, but even it's listed as near threatened, which means its future is anything but certain. Then you have the black rhino, critically endangered, but its population is actually slowly recovering. In Asia, the greater one-horned rhino is a bit of a conservation success story. It's vulnerable, but it's been brought back from the brink. But then, the other 2. Look at those numbers. An estimated 50 Javan rhinos left, and maybe as few as 34 Sumatran rhinos. They are hanging on by the absolute thinnest of threads.
And here, you can really see some of those differences we're talking about. On the left, that's the African white rhino with its 2 horns and that smoother-looking skin. And on the right, the greater one-horned rhino from Asia. Besides the obvious 1 horn versus 2, just look at that incredible armor-plated skin with all those deep folds. They're related for sure, but they are worlds apart.
Okay, we can't talk about rhinos without talking about the one feature that has defined them, and tragically has become the main reason for their destruction, the horn. It's both their greatest defense and their greatest vulnerability. Just let this number sink in for a second. Across all 5 species, in all of Africa and all of Asia, there are fewer than 27,000 rhinos left. That is fewer people than you'd find in a small town, scattered across 2 entire continents. That's the baseline we're fighting from.
And the story of the black rhino shows just how bad it can get. In 1960, there were about 100,000 of them. Now look at that second bar. By 1995, poaching had wiped out 98% of them. 98%! Just over 2,000 animals left. Now, thanks to some really intense conservation work, the numbers have started to creep back up. But it is a fragile, fragile recovery, and every single rhino counts.
And this right here, this is why they're being killed. The illegal trade is mostly driven by demand in parts of Asia, where the horn is either carved into fancy objects to show off wealth, or it's ground into a powder and used in traditional medicine. But to really understand the tragedy here, you have to know what a rhino horn is actually made of. And this is the key fact. A rhino's horn isn't bone. It's not some magic substance. It's made of keratin. That is the exact same stuff that your hair and your fingernails are made of. And medically speaking, there is zero scientific evidence that it has any healing powers at all. None.
So, with the stakes this incredibly high, what is actually being done? Let's take a look at the front lines of conservation and see how this global battle is being fought.
Well, the fight is happening on a bunch of different fronts at once. It starts with incredibly brave rangers on anti-poaching patrols, often in really dangerous situations. It also means restoring and protecting safe habitats because, rhinos need space to live and grow. Some places are even trimming rhino horns. It's a painless procedure, kind of like cutting your fingernails, and it makes the rhino a much less valuable target for poachers. And, maybe most importantly, it means working with local communities so they have a real stake in protecting their natural heritage.
Now this leads us to one of the most intense debates in all of conservation. Should the trade in rhino horn be legalized? The people who support it say that money from a legal, regulated trade could pay for conservation and crush the black market. But opponents are really worried it would just make the horn a normal product, which could make demand explode and create a way for illegal horns to be slipped into the legal system. It is an incredibly complicated problem with no easy answer.
Ultimately, the fate of the rhino isn't going to be decided by a single solution. It's going to take a huge collective effort from governments, from conservation groups, from local communities, and really from people all around the world. The fight against poaching, protecting their homes, and reducing the demand for horn, it all has to happen together.
And when you boil it all down, maybe it just comes down to this one simple, powerful idea. The value of a rhino horn isn't in some carving or some powder. Its only real value is on the animal it belongs to. A magnificent survivor of a bygone age just trying to find its place in our modern world.